Well, welcome to my shop and to my set of videos on the basic use and safety of tools. In this video, we're going to talk about this, the thickness planer. If you're living in Europe, you might call it the thicknesser, but here in the States, most people will call it a planer. The job of this particular tool is to take the top of a surface off and to reduce the thickness through that cut to make it parallel with the bottom. Let's talk a little bit about how it works. Thickness planers are a rather safe tool. Almost all of what happens is contained inside of them, and the result, the sawdust and chips that come off, are sucked up inside of this vacuum unit. Because of that, this is one tool where you can usually get away with not even wearing eye protection because so much of it is happening inside here. I'll leave that up to you, of course. The safest thing is to wear your protective gear everywhere. And if you're new to a tool, it's usually best to do the safest thing. So let's take the example of this board. I've already squared it off and started the milling process by making this nice flat edge and this nice flat edge on the jointer. What we want to do next is make the thickness uniform on this particular edge. And you might ask, well, why didn't we just use this instead of the jointer? And the reason is that this particular tool is not good at making something uniformly flat across a long length unless the bottom surface, which is running on the table, is already flat. There are rollers that push this board down as it goes through the machine. And if there were a cup, the material would just ride through with that cup. So you'd end up with a uniform thickness throughout the board, but the cup would not go away. That's why we use a jointer first, and then we use this thickness planer to do the other edge. There's really only one thing that you can adjust on a thickness planer, and that's the height of the infeed and outfeed table. It has this little crank here that moves that table up and it moves it down. Your job in operating the planer is simply to insert the board so that the infeed will grab it and roll it through at a uniform speed. It's almost a hands-off device. The only thing you really need to adjust is to set it to the proper height on this infeed table so that it's cutting just the right amount of material off. So the question you may ask is, how do I know what that height is? And on almost every planer where the infeed table meets the machine, there is a guide on it right here. You want to be just under that guide. Set it before you've set any material inside the machine, and then you'll know that if your board passes underneath this guide, it should roll through in a uniform manner without taking off too much material. Once you've made the material pass through for the first time, you probably won't have gotten all of the surface flattened that you want, and you'll need to make another run. Simply pull the material back out, bring the table up a little bit. It will depend on your particular planer how much you can bring it up. But on mine, I do half a crank, which is maybe a 32nd of an inch, and I pass it through once again. Then the question becomes, how many times do you do that? When do you stop? On some planers, on the high end, there will be digital gauges on them which show you the actual thickness of what has just passed through the machine. Mine didn't come with one of those, but I did install one afterwards, so I read that from this particular digital readout device. Your planer may not have that, and that's okay. If it doesn't, you can simply get yourself a less expensive pair of calipers than this digital device, let it pass through, and then simply measure it yourself as to what the thickness happens to be. The important part is that you don't measure the ends of the boards that were cut, because sometimes there's just a little bit of rock in there, and those are a little bit thinner. You want to measure towards the middle of the board. When it reaches the target thickness that you're looking for, that's when you're done. So what about the safety precautions in using this machine? Well, the good news is this is one of the safest machines in the shop. In general, never stick your fingers past the entrance here or past the exit over here. If something does get jammed inside of there and isn't rolling out, turn the machine off, crank it back down, and then just grab that piece out again while it's not running. That way you'll stay safe. The other thing to keep in mind is that you should not move the table up or down while it's operating running through. You could get out of a bind by moving it down while it's running, but the better way to do that is just to turn the machine off, then let it down again and bring it through for a separate pass. Other than that, keep your hearing protection on because it is noisy, and you should be set to use this in as safe a manner as possible. Let's see how it works and then we'll wrap this up. With the machine powered on and the table set to the appropriate height, I just insert the board for this very first pass and let the machine take over. I know that I'm going to need a second pass, so I go ahead and crank the table up just a little bit and let that pass run through. Now I can use my calipers to check towards the middle of the board to see if I've reached my target thickness. I have not yet reached that thickness, so I can raise the table one more time and pass the board through again. Keep repeating this until you get to your desired thickness. And that's really all there is to it. I've taken this one now down to a uniform length of 5/8 of an inch. If I wanted to go further, I could actually flip it and do this side as well. Just keep it going down until I got to the target thickness. It's a very simple and a very powerful tool to use, and fortunately it's a safe one as well. I hope you enjoyed the content and learning how to use the thicknessing planer here. If you're interested in learning more about the tools around the shop and their basic and safe use, keep watching this series. Hope you enjoy making some sawdust and some awesome new projects as well.